All right. I think genres are stupid in general, so. Hi, I'm Billy Basso. I'm the developer of Animal Well. Where do I start? When it comes to puzzles, first I typically come up with game mechanics, or I come up with items and just like playful interactions that I think would be fun on their own. And then designing puzzles is the process of sort of playing with the things I've made for myself and figuring out where I get surprised, and sort of finding those like edge cases between seeing two things I've created interact, and then sort of designing rooms to showcase those surprising bits. I just do that over and over again and string rooms together that will show you one thing at a time. I don't really get inspirations for the puzzles. I get inspirations for the game mechanics, and then the puzzles kind of come as a result of all that. There aren't any points where you really need to use the flute that fast. There are options on PC. You can use the number pad to more explicitly enter the flute directions as kind of a secret feature. Then a lot of people maybe don't understand that you kind of have to press the button multiple times instead of like tapping the direction. It's kind of like playing Guitar Hero where you're like strumming while holding the note down. I think you can get through your playthrough if you just maybe practice a little more. I was already a personal fan of video game Dunkey and have been sort of following his videos for a long time. I liked them as people, and I kind of also knew that they had a big audience and that they really trusted them. So it didn't honestly seem that risky to me. The biggest concern was probably that they'd want like creative control over the game and they would meddle too much. But after meeting with them a few times, that kind of quickly became obvious that wasn't going to happen. So it just seemed like a win-win scenario to work with them.
And I want to apologize to Billy about the Frisbee incident.
People are saying this is...
My favorite Dunkey video is probably actually one of the more recent ones where it's just all these clips of like Gordon Ramsay cooking edited in a very funny way. And there's this one moment where he just, I don't even know, but he says, "The meat is stinking." And I don't know why that's funny, but I like that part.
The meat is stinking.
I pretty much added everything I wanted to in the game. It did take like 7 years to make. Maybe I could have worked on it for another 6 months to polish things up a little bit, but there aren't any major missing features. Since I didn't have any external deadlines, I kind of got to work on the game as long as I wanted and don't have any major regrets. I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to use an off-the-shelf engine. I think I get a lot of enjoyment out of just understanding how systems work and kind of just how video games and computers work in general. So it just started that way, where I was pretty much making a game without an engine, and I didn't really know if it was going to be a really impressive game or if it was going to hold me back in any ways, but I knew I at least wanted to do that just from a personal satisfaction point of view. The one that comes to mind, my favorite video game from my childhood, would probably be Super Mario Bros. 3. It was one of the first games I remember playing. Just the amount of secrets in that game were very cool. I got to play like all the early NES Mario games all around the same time and love them all, so they're kind of very foundational to like my relationship with video games. Yes, so pros and cons working solo. One, you're just generally much more efficient when you're working by yourself because you don't need to like communicate with anybody. You don't need to pitch your ideas. You don't need to worry about stepping on each other's toes or doing redundant work. But you are still slower. You're like one really efficient person. No one is helping you, so there's no like distribution among like tasks. It gets kind of lonely, so that's kind of a con. You're kind of lost in your own thoughts about and maybe doubting whether anyone will like what you're doing, and you're not really getting a lot of feedback. I think it's also a pretty reliable and sustainable way to work because you can keep the budget like really low, and you can kind of make exactly what you want, but it just might take a long time. Staying motivated for a long development cycle, I would say just make sure you find the joy in it and do things in a way that is fun, that like you're proud of, and don't rush to meet other people's expectations. And if you can find a routine and a workflow where you're still at least having fun every day you work on it, then in theory you can work on it forever because it's just a fun hobby. And so I would try to integrate it into your life in those terms as much as possible. Yeah, there were a few mechanics that were discovered through happy accident. A really like obvious one that people question all the time is the bubble jump mechanic. I did design it so you can like jump off a bubble one time in the game, but then kind of very early on realized like, oh, if you're skilled enough and you time it just right, you can like blow your second bubble while you're in the mid-air after your first jump, and you can land on it, and then with enough practice you can kind of chain them together. But then once I discovered that, I kind of designed the whole game with that in mind, and it's still very much an intentional thing ultimately. There were a few tools that I kind of decided to not include in the game just because they wouldn't really fit, or they were kind of redundant with existing items. I won't say what they are because they might go in a future game. But yeah, I did have to tell my partner Dan, Jason, and Leah about a lot of the secrets in the game before launch. They were just things that I kind of knew they would never discover on their own, so I had to kind of just give them some heads up of what was going in the game and give them some instructions on how to sort of test them. Ultimately, they're very helpful when they can test the puzzles, but there were a few things that they didn't know about. Other animals that got cut or replaced. I originally was imagining the beluga whale to be a killer whale, although that kind of got changed. The chinchillas used to be little like bears, but the scale was all wrong. In general, I was just like drawing animals way smaller in the beginning before I got to terms with the sort of scale of the world. There used to be like smaller bats, and that would be like scared of the dark, and you would have to hide in pools of light to avoid them, but they ultimately were just kind of futzy and got cut from the game. There actually are still traces of them in the code that you can uncover. My current favorite video game and why. Dan is telling me to say Animal Well, but that's because he's in charge of marketing over here. But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to try to hold on to my integrity and say, what am I playing right now? Playing the Elden Ring DLC, and that's very good, but that's kind of a uninspired answer. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, played through that earlier this year, and that's an excellent puzzle game. That's probably my favorite recent indie game. Everyone should play that. What do I think of the term Metroidvania? I mean, I understand that people want to come up with a name for this genre or this idea that it's like a Metroidvania, but it's in your brain. I think Metroidvania sounds kind of stupid, but I don't have a better name for it. So Metroidvanias also sounds kind of stupid. I think genres are stupid in general, so I don't really have a strong opinion about it. So just say what you will say.
All right, that's it.
All right.
You good? Yep. All right, got it.